It's really exciting to have all of you here. As Adnan said, my name is Ilhan Omar, and I'm running to be your next Congresswoman for the 5th Congressional District. Before we begin, I want to reflect on the power of right now. Across the world, we are coming to the end of Ramadan and reflecting on Eid. I also want to acknowledge this month of Pride. I'm thankful to the Black trans women who 49 years ago staged a sit-in at the Stonewall Inn. And while we reflect on progress, I stand here before you tonight at a pivotal period in our history. It seems like all we have done is resist and fight since the 2016 elections. Our opponents point fingers at Black people, new immigrants, and Muslims for our hard times. They use the politics of scarcity and fear of the other to divide us and pin us against each other. Dividing families, ripping children from their parents and caging them. Dividing unions and stripping labor of the right to collectively bargain. Dividing a nation and proclaiming we are too different to get along. Like so many of us, there's a part of me that wants to go inside my house, close the curtains, lock the door, so that I can keep my family safe. But I choose to get up. I choose to continue to fight for my children, for your children, for our collective future. And I'm going to be honest, it is gatherings like this that give me hope, that remind me of the obligation each one of us has. Look at us, hundreds of neighbors coming together, determined to ensure that our voices and the voices on the margins are heard. I'm determined because that is a reality that I have lived. I was born in Somalia, raised in a refugee camp, and nurtured here in Minnesota. As a young girl in the refugee camps, I dreamt about coming to the United States. My grandfather would hope aloud of what was to come, the possibility of a free existence. His stories left me enamored by the mere concept of democratic participation. He cultivated my passion and angered my American dream. Upon arriving here in the United States, I quickly realized that the opportunities I sought were not fully accessible to the people already living here. My first impressions of America were visible homelessness, witnessing the struggles of classmates that weren't able to afford lunch, the lack of updated textbooks or no textbooks at all, families working 2 jobs to pay the rent and to put food on the table. I remember confronting my grandfather and my family members about the tangible disconnection between our dreams and the reality. They encouraged me not to complain, but to do something about it. I learned that if you want a certain world, you have to organize for it. And that's how the problem solver in me was born. Then I got started. So in high school, when I saw racial and cultural divides, I helped form a unity and diversity group to create a United Nations coalition of students. When I realized we were in the midst of growing hunger and malnutrition, I became a champion for kids, joined a coalition of people as a nutrition educator to lobby Washington and establish our after-school and summer feeding programs. And last year, when I learned that there was going to be limits put on the numbers that were being proposed for refugees to be allowed in this country to 27,000, I went to DC, worked with settlement agencies, had meetings with the Trump administration, and got that number doubled. And when our communities and states' children were inflicted by measles, I proposed funding for outreach, prevention, and control of infectious diseases. Faced with great opposition, I was able to bring the Republican opposition, the governor's office, and with the help of my friend, Representative Mike Freidberg, to secure $5 million to go into that effort. And for the last 2 years, I served as assistant minority leader, working close with my DFL colleagues to fight against the limitation on women's right to choose, secure critical funding for infrastructure in our district, in our state, and protect freedom of speech. During our last election, we made history. We ignited interest and built a movement of young people, people of color, and brought new voters into the party. We increased the voter turnout by 37% and proved that our voices are powerful and that our voices need to be heard. Like many in this room, I come from a generation that has been deeply impacted by the decisions that long-time experts and career politicians have been making over the years. I'm part of peoples who have been harmed by leaders bending to corporate and special interest. The status quo continues to deepening the divides between people economically, racially, and by our genders and our religions. I wake up, like many of you, every morning and see the skyrocketing student debt, the high cost of childcare, the struggle of working parents, the destruction of our public school education, the busting of our unions and safety nets, mass incarceration of black and brown bodies. We see people deeply invested in making our trans communities invisible. We see the demonization of religious minorities. This is why we are excited to run a people-centered campaign about people-centered issues. One that is not about passing through communities, but about building authentic relationships. Because the solutions are, it's not having people fight for women, fight for people of color, fight for young people or immigrants. The solution is making sure that we are elected to be the voices at those decision-making tables. In today's divisive and destructive political environment, it's going to be very important for us to resist the politics of scarcity, to build an economy that works for all of us, to champion public education, to ensure environmental justice and energy independence, to build resilient 21st century infrastructure, to prioritize humane immigration and criminal justice system, and ensure a fair tax system that allows government to fulfill a role in assisting all who need it. When I think back to that little girl in that refugee camp, I can't help but smile. I can't help but think about how my grandfather was right, that democratic participation is freedom unlike any other, and that by joining together, organizing, we are able to achieve anything. So thank you so much for being here for the beginning of our congressional race. We know we are going to win because we are going to do it together. But I'm gonna need your help. I'm gonna need all of you to volunteer, to make phone calls, to knock on doors, to tell your friends about our people-centered campaign. We're gonna need you to donate because our campaign is entirely going to be funded by contributions you make. So I'm going to ask for all of you to invest in me, in us. Who's ready? Once again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for being part of my journey. I'm a working mom, a public high school graduate. I'm a policy analyst, a refugee, an intergenerational organizer, a coalition builder, a graduate with a student debt. I'm a public servant and a global leader with over a decade of experience. Again, my name is Ilhan, and I can't wait to be your next Congresswoman in